another week of the King's Information Network podcast, following Book 2, Confronting the Past. And we are already up to Chapter 10, so getting close to halfway. So let's get right into it. Chapter 10. The next morning, Russ was finishing up breakfast when Shannon appeared, yawning and stretching. He smiled. "Good morning." "Morning," she replied, giving me a quick kiss before peeking at the food. Based on the smell, you've become a passable cook while you were gone." "Soren is an excellent cook and has taught both Dean and I well," he said, "although I'd already taught myself the basics before that out of necessity." "I'm happy to take advantage of those skills," she said. "I'm still barely competent." He finished dishing her up a plate and passed it to her. "Enjoy." "I will," she said, and settled at the kitchen table. "Did your parents ever guess what you were up to the nights you didn't come home and then we appeared together for breakfast?" "If they did, they never mentioned it, thank goodness. But then we hadn't been doing it that long before Chris killed them." He shrugged, feeling the usual pang, but it was easier each time to say it out loud. He would always feel some guilt at his parents' death and the relationship before that point, all of which had been his fault. He joined her at the table. "Okay," he said after they dug in for a minute. "What's on our schedule today?" "We've got a meeting with Lieutenant Johnson mid-morning, then the meeting Colin and I arranged closer to dusk. Other than that, the day is open to whatever we want to accomplish. I have to do some guild work, since that's never ending. You're welcome to come along, or if you have other plans, I can send Paul and crew with you." "Let me think about it," he said. I'm doing better, but there's still a lot right now." "You better be doing a little better," she teased gently, nudging his knee with hers. He smiled. "Let's see how the meeting with Johnson goes and plan from there. I could probably do some work of my own at your place." "Sounds good." After breakfast, they headed to the constable garrison via the guild headquarters so Shannon could check in to make sure nothing urgent had come up overnight. Not only was there no urgent guild news, there was nothing from the hostlers either. Russ had to take the lack of bodies as a good thing. Chris would at least want to talk to him before he did anything drastic. Russ had to make sure he didn't goad him into anything that evening. The local garrison, headed by a Lieutenant Johnson, had only 20 permanent members. That had always been something of a problem, allowing the guilds to self-govern, though they'd mostly behaved before Chris. At least, Russ granted, behaved enough that it had never led to an all-out war. True, there was a much larger local militia, but they would only be called up in case of a full-scale war with another country, not for local politics. Plus, most, if not all, of that same militia would be a member of one of the guilds, which didn't exactly help. Lieutenant Johnson met them in his office and listened carefully to Russ's proposal of an alliance with the rest of the city against Malone and his hustlers. "I'd say call up the militia under kin orders, but they're going to be picking their sides either way based on their guilds. So I think it would just make things messy and potentially tip Chris Malone off." "And what do Cal and Rain have to say about this?" Johnson asked, leaning forward and putting his arms on his desk as he watched Russ. "Cal's willing to at least be present tonight. Rain's more cautious, but she has her reasons. I can't particularly blame her." "There will be harsh consequences for anyone who moves against Christopher Malone," Johnson said. "Either you move against him now, while there's still will and drive to defeat him, or you wait until he's slowly picked off everyone who opposes him one by one. It's your choice, but I happen to think the former option is much more appealing." "And what skin do you have in this, Mr. Darcy?" "I grew up here. Malone and I have some unfinished personal business. Plus, I'm here on behalf of Ken. Colin Lockholm will be back in the city by tomorrow as well, if you need more authority than me." So this would be a full alliance. Ken, our local branch of the army, and the guilds, working together against a single rogue guild. "That sums it up, yes," Russ said. "And you're not calling the army in why?" "First, Greyspire solves its own problems," Russ replied seriously. "And second, that's a weakness that, even now, we can't afford to show Neris or Alia. Pulling in our army against our own people is always a bad look." "Understood. I too am from Greyspire," Johnson said, "so I agree. Just wanted to know the reason." He stroked his well-kept beard before nodding decisively. "Very well, dusk at the town square. I'll be there with a couple of my people." Russ grinned, partially in relief at getting a straight yes. "Thank you. I trust you know what you're doing, Agent Darcy. I've only heard good things about Kin, and you know Greyspire." Russ didn't miss the change from Mr. to Agent. "Glad to have you on board," he said seriously. "Doing my duty to my city and country," Johnson said, standing and offering his hand. After brief goodbyes, he and Shannon were back out in the foggy morning street. "Finally, a firm yes." "Cal and Rain will come around. I suspect we'll have firm answers from them by tomorrow morning, too," Shannon said reassuringly. "Not everyone is as decisive as you and I." He laughed at her wink. "You're right. It's every minute Matt and Morgan are there is another he could hurt them. They'll know we're coming. We're moving as fast as we can. It sucks, but it's all we can do," she said. He sighed. "Yeah, now we have to figure out how to spend the afternoon. I think it's best if I'm not alone. Mind if I pick some things up from the house and join you at headquarters? Colin'd be pissed if I stew." he's not the only one. We'll swing by, grab lunch, and make camp in my office until it's time to rally the troops to growl at each other over the fountain. He rolled his eyes. You know that's not what this is. I know, she kissed his cheek. Although if you really want a distraction, there are other ways, she teased. He smiled crookedly, feeling a flash of amusement. I don't think I could adequately give you the focus you deserve right now, as tempting as that may be. Fair enough. We've got time. Russ took her hand. We do. The afternoon passed relatively quickly. People were in and out of the office as Shannon conducted regular business, but also sent word for the evening's gathering. Russ, ostensibly, was working on a plan of attack, even though he knew Colin and Soren would need to fix it. But mostly he watched Shannon work and tried, without success, to see himself in her place. Soren spoke a lot about how, despite all the mistakes he'd made, he felt strongly that the universe helped set you on your path for a reason. That things might really suck at one point, but it was so you'd be in a position to make a bigger, better difference down the line. Russ had mostly come around to that way of thinking after 4 years of living with him, but he never felt it as strongly as he did right then. Despite Morgan and Matt being in very real and potentially extreme danger, his path had carved to go this way so that he could be here now, and, almost more importantly, so Shannon could be where she was. Or even for Soren to be where he was. Before he knew it, it was time to get going. Ready? Shannon asked as they moved out to the area in front of the headquarters. At least half of the formal guild members were outside waiting. Even in the gathering dark and fog, Russ recognized more than a few faces, former peers and mentors both. Yes, he said, straightening. Another of Soren's favorite mantras was that you couldn't stop bad things from happening sometime, but you had to live your life and do the best with the choices you made. It was Russ's moment to fix past mistakes as best he could with the passing of time. The weirdest part was, he finally felt comfortable doing that. With Shannon at his side and his new family on their way, he was strong enough. Let's do this. She squeezed his shoulder and smiled. Let's. She raised her hand, gestured, and her people fell in behind them. Lieutenant Johnson and 10 of his people waited on their side of the square central floral arrangement. He nodded politely to Shannon and shook Russ's hand. Good luck, Agent Darcy. I hope tonight doesn't come to blows. It shouldn't, he said confidently. Thanks for coming. Of course. It's about time we all did something about the hostlers. He nodded and glanced around, but there was no sign of Cal. Russ cut his gaze to Shannon questioningly. He's here, staying in the shadows. Paul saw him. She then gestured again, and much of her force faded into the foggy dusk. Johnson's soldiers gathered with her remaining people, making a human fence across their side of the square. Russ's instinct was to follow, but instead he made himself plant his feet. He folded his arms across his chest to wait, Shannon on one side, Johnson on the other. He spotted Chris a split second after Shannon stiffened and Johnson's hand dropped to his axe head. His old friend sauntered smugly to the central flowers. Stay here, Russ murmured to the other two, and moved forward as well, stopping on the other side of the arrangement, only a couple feet away from Chris. Well, Morgan wasn't lying. You did come, Chris said with one of his classic head tilts, light eyes glittering in the gloom. Hello, Chris. Russ kept his hands relaxed at his side, and in reaction to Chris's words needed to be purposeful. It's been a while, Russ. Behind Chris, the hostlers spread out to match their forces. It has. Been hearing about how busy you've made yourself while I've been gone. Chris smirked. And you went and sold out to the Crown. A kin, Agent Russell? Really? It was a natural fit after the skills I learned growing up here. Keeps me sharp. There were so many more opportunities under the three, Chris said, an edge of taunting in his voice. I mean, look at you here, interfering now. I'm not the one who made interfering an art form, Chris. Russ spread his hands. Give me back Matt and Morgan, and this can all be sorted out with anyone needing to go to jail. Or dying. It wasn't going to work, but he had to try, for Matt and Morgan's sake, and so he could say he had. Chris laughed. I don't think you can make that promise, Russell. Not if the Crown gets wind of everything I've been doing here, he said gleefully. I could give you more details, if you'd like. As second in command of kin, I can make that call. Obviously, there would need to be some checks and rules, but you could keep your little kingdom. That's the problem, Chris said, dropping his voice. I don't want to keep my little kingdom. Madness lurked on his face. I want all of Gracespire. He laughed. Maybe even more. If the three did it, why not someone else? Russ let out a slow breath. That's that, then. Very well. Chris grinned, bouncing on his toes. Oh, good. Then I can kill Matthew or Morgan. Although I suppose it should be Matthew, since I promised Morgan if you came for her, I wouldn't. His head cocked. But then, you giving up this easily probably means I can sidestep that promise. Russ gave him a half smile, knowing exactly what to say to give Matt and Morgan both more time. This isn't me giving up easily, Chris. This is me offering you a challenge. Chris froze, gaze locking on Russ. A challenge, he repeated. That's what you want, right? The opportunity to finally beat me? I will beat you, Chris hissed, and Russ reveled at being the one to keep his cool this time. You haven't yet, but this'll be your chance. How about a trade, then? He asked feverishly. You for Matt and Morgan. Your life for that of your best friend and the little agent. Russ sent a mental apology to the captives. But where's the challenge in that? You get nothing if it's not a straight fight, Chris. And if you kill me so quickly, the crown will descend upon Greyspire and leave no stone unturned. Your conquest will be over before it really begins. And how does that change if I kill you later? That's your choice, Russ said with a mild shrug, feigning nonchalance. But you'll be in a much better position to bargain if Colin and the rest of the kin see you following your own rules. Chris's eyes narrowed, as if he could sense the net Russ was trying to catch him in. So you want to play a game. You versus me. He nodded slowly. I appreciate the consideration. Very well. I accept. Morgan and Matthew will stay alive for now, but I am not a patient man, Russell. I remember well. I won't keep you waiting for long. His old friend smiled. Deal. See you soon, Russ. See you soon, Russ said, suddenly seeing exactly how this needed to go, even though none of his friends or allies would like it. He'd have to play this carefully to get it past Soren and Colin. Chris gave him a mocking bow and turned to leave. Turning his back on Christopher Malone was not his first choice, but Russ knew he had to show confidence, so he did. He headed back, trusting Shannon, Johnson, and Cal, who now stood with them, to warn him if Chris tried anything. To his relief, he made it safely to the trio and glanced back to find that all signs of Chris and his people gone. He let out a breath. What happened? Shannon asked. We couldn't hear much after the initial greetings. He wanted me to trade my life for Matt and Morgan, claimed that would end it. I told him that wouldn't be possible, he summarized. The rest of it could wait, if he ever passed it on. He met each of the three's eyes briefly. It's functionally war now, not to put too fine a point on it. Be careful, be cautious, and I'll have a plan within the next day or two. Cal, I'm glad to see you. Did anyone see Rain? Tim did, Shannon reported. Said she was lurking with her second and a couple of others in the rooms above the general store. Russ nodded. Let me know if you hear anything from her. I'll be at my house. Cal looked worried. I hope you know what you're doing, Darcy. We're putting a lot of trust in you. I do, but you also don't have much choice if you want to ever stop Chris, Russ said, with more of an edge than he intended. Seeing Chris in person had his heart beating rapidly and anxiety thrumming. Cal straightened, looking annoyed. My problem is that you still call him Chris. Trust me, that's not an issue. Shannon put a restraining hand on Russ's arm. Tempers are high. Malone is the cause, not each other. That's what we need to remember. Guildmaster Culvert is right, Johnson said. I know it's easy to be scared and angry, but truth is, those of us in the city have not done our due diligence to keep Malone from rising to power. Now, we need help, and Agent Darcy is offering. I, for one, am willing to see an end in exchange for a couple of days of increased uncertainty. Cal deflated, and Russ grimaced. Of course Cal wasn't the problem, or at least not more than any citizen of Greyspire. I promise that whatever feelings of friendship I once had for Chris, Malone, are long gone, he told Cal. They left when he admitted to killing my parents, and even if that hadn't been enough, he now has a fellow agent and one of my best friends. I will do whatever I need to make sure he is stopped. I know, Cal replied. Whatever you need us for, the Masons will be there. The lieutenant is right. We should have dealt with this a long time ago, and I know the Masons were part of the problem. Reluctance to rock the boat isn't always the right choice. My predecessor chose wrong, and I followed in her footsteps. The important thing is, you're with us now, Shannon said. Keep in touch, she told Johnson and Cal. We'll do the same. The two acknowledged and headed off to their people. Shannon looked at Russ. What do you need? In the same way he'd wanted the hustle and bustle of the guild headquarters earlier, now he needed quiet. His instinct was to be alone, but he was self-aware enough to realize it probably wasn't a good idea. He offered his hand. Quiet. Come home with me? She took it. We'll get everyone sent home, then we can go too. It took only a minute, then they walked back to his house. Russ knew some of Shannon's people were keeping an eye on them because he could sense the attention. He didn't mind, though, knowing they were doing it for a good reason. Before they reached the house, one of Shannon's people Russ didn't know materialized out of the fog. Lockholm's back, and he's brought 2 people with him, she reported. Russ's heart jumped. That was so quick. Colin must have really hauled ass. Thanks, Macy, Shannon said. Anyone notice their arrival? Other than us? No. We haven't seen any sign of spies from the hostlers. Good. Let me know if that changes, she said, even as Russ slid by her, hurrying for the house. He threw open the door and was greeted by 3 familiar and welcome faces. Colin looked up and grinned. I brought reinforcements. Dean beamed and immediately hugged Russ. Soren raised an eyebrow. You better have slept. He grinned at the ease of it all, returning the hug tightly. I did. At least some. Shannon entered behind him, and he reached out a hand to pull her forward. Soren, Dean, this is Shannon, one of my best friends and head of the local guild. Shannon Culvert, she said, offering her hand to Soren, since Dean was still attached to Russ, Guildmaster of the Weavers. Nice to meet you. Any friend of Russ's is a friend of ours, Soren said, as if he met new people every day, and wasn't functionally a hilltop-only hermit who saw the same people day in and day out. It was quite a surprise to find out you survived the Battle of Oakbridge. Soren smiled crookedly. Honestly, it was a surprise to me, too. Shannon blinked and laughed. Fair enough. Nice to meet you, Dean. Same, Dean said, finally letting go of Russ and returning to his father's side. So how did the meeting go? Colin demanded. That's what you were coming back from, right? Yes, it went about as expected. Chris agreed to not kill Matt or Morgan immediately, and give us a bit of time to make it a challenge for him. How long do we think it gets us? That was a slightly tricky question, particularly because it required him to lie convincingly to Soren, which had never been a strong suit. 3 days tops, he said, looking Soren straight in the eye. In reality, he had maybe a day and a half before Chris acted, unless something changed. But Russ knew what that had to be, and that no one in the room would approve. He would have to go at it sideways to make them all think it would have a different outcome. Soren nodded thoughtfully. Okay, what have we missed while Colin was coming to get us? The more details, the better. Before we start, did you all get dinner? Not yet. Did you? Soren countered. He didn't eat much, but he got it, Shannon answered wryly. Russ shrugged unapologetically. Then we should begin with food. I can put something together, Dean said, straightening. If you show me where the kitchen is, I can do that while you fill Dad and Colin in. You sure you've got it? Dean shot him a look. Russ, please. He had to laugh. Okay, sorry. Let me show you. I'll be right back. As he escorted Dean to the kitchen, the knot in his stomach loosened. While he was glad on many levels to have reconnected with Shannon, this was his family, and it was a relief to have them around him again, solving problems together.